The 2002 version of Rollerball is often brought up as not just one of the worst remakes of all time, but one of the worst films ever made. Originally slated as a summer blockbuster with the potential to rake in hundreds of millions of dollars, Rollerball was plagued by production issues. But most importantly, creative differences between the director and a producer resulted in an investigation by the FBI, and eventually, jail time. In today's episode, we'll be discussing all things Rollerball.
You push the limits.
Grab hold!
You go to the extreme.
They're going to kill you!
Gotta catch me first.
You live for the rush. But on February 8th,
We'll deal with this on the track ourselves.
do you have what it takes to survive? Rollerball. Rated PG-13. Get in the game February 8th.
The origin of Rollerball goes all the way back to 1973, when a short story called Rollerball Murder was published in S.W.A.T magazine. Less than 2 years later, the story was adapted into a film that had a budget of $5 to $6 million behind it. The 1975 version of Rollerball was a dystopian sci-fi action movie that took place in the year 2018, or at least what the creatives behind this movie expected the year 2018 to look like. The main character, Jonathan E., was played by the late great James Caan. He's the veteran captain of the Houston Rollerball team and might just be the only person in human history that looks like a complete badass while wearing roller skates. Well, other than maybe Hal from Malcolm in the Middle. And all you need to know about the sport of rollerball is there's a circular arena where a bunch of guys on roller skates and a bunch of guys on motorcycles ride around beating the shit out of each other. And each of the two teams scores points by throwing a metal ball into a funnel-shaped hoop thing. But even though Jonathan is more than capable of playing for several more years, the powers that be want him to retire, simply because he has become bigger than the sport itself. When he refuses to do so, the corporations that run the sport of rollerball make each consecutive match more and more dangerous in an attempt to either injure him and force him into retirement, or just flat out kill him. Oh, and in this dystopian future, books have been obliterated, all of the world's knowledge is held on one massive supercomputer, and corporations control everything. Yeah, like that could ever happen. By the way, today's episode is brought to you by Tushy. Alright, with all of that out of the way, we can jump ahead to 1999, when it was reported that John McTiernan was set to direct a remake of Rollerball. John McTiernan is one of those directors that a lot of people might not know by name, but if you're into action movies, you've probably seen at least one, if not several of his works. He directed Predator, Die Hard, The Hunt for Red October, Last Action Hero, Die Hard with a Vengeance, and that's not even his full filmography. And one might ask, why even remake Rollerball in the first place? In the early 2000s, studios were looking to cash in on extreme sports in any way possible. Not to mention, a complete ripoff of Rollerball called Future Sport was just produced by ABC in the late 90s. So it makes sense that MGM and United Artists wanted to capitalize on a franchise with an established name that had some potential. But it turns out that the script for the Rollerball remake leaked out way before production began. In September of 1999, Ain't It Cool News shared a lengthy write-up about the first draft of the film's script. Now there's a website that you probably haven't heard the name of since AIM was a thing. But they said that the first draft of the script improved upon the original movie in every way possible. The film took place in the very distant future, sometime during the 25th century, in a world where corporations control everything. And society has been dumbed down to the point where no one has the ability to read or write, and everything is done on a visual level because the corporations believe that excess knowledge and thought limits worker productivity. Hey, wait a minute, I've seen that movie. It was called Idiocracy.
Welcome to Costco. I love you.
But that version of the script received 2 additional rewrites because John McTiernan believed that movie-going audiences weren't interested in social commentary. They just wanted to see people beat the shit out of each other on skates. The final version of the script was intentionally shared, not leaked, to film journalists at IGN and Ain't It Cool News. All of the optimism that Ain't It Cool had for the original version of the script went out the window. And the writer for IGN flat out recommended that the script be revised completely before production even started. But that didn't happen, and the Rollerball remake officially began filming in July of 2000.
Welcome to Rollerball.
As for the cast, the character of Jonathan E. was renamed Jonathan Cross and would be played by Chris Klein. John Reno was cast as the villain, Alexei Petrovic, and 2 brand new characters were added to the remake. Marcus Ridley, played by LL Cool J, and Aurora, played by Rebecca Romaine. In the remake, Jonathan Cross is a minor league hockey player who isn't happy with his station in life. He spends most of his free time participating in illegal street luge races. Because, like I said, everything was more extreme in the early 2000s, and everyone had S.W.A.T energy drink flowing through their veins. Marcus Ridley, his friend and former high school teammate, persuades him into packing his bags for Central Asia to join his team in a sport that has yet to hit North America, rollerball. And by the way, all of those script revisions did away with the dystopian future theme completely. The entire movie is set in the year 2005. Also, because it had been 27 years since the original Rollerball movie came out, the sport was changed quite a bit in order to appeal to the sensibilities of a 2000s viewing audience. The production design was inspired by professional wrestling, which explains why Paul Heyman was cast as one of the announcers and Shane McMahon had a brief cameo. Going into this movie, I knew that it had terrible reviews from film critics and audiences alike, so I was sort of scratching my head during the first 25-30 minutes of the movie. The opening street luge scene and the first rollerball match weren't like Academy Award worthy or anything, but I was legitimately entertained during those scenes. Unfortunately, after Chris Klein and Rebecca Romijn do the horizontal mambo in the back of a sweaty gym locker room and begin to investigate the shady dealings of the Rollerball League, it's clear that something went very wrong during the making of this movie. It turns out that the original cut of Rollerball was over 2 hours long and carried a hard R rating. That version of the film was played during a test screening in Las Vegas around April or May of 2001. Reactions to that test screening were extremely negative. So MGM and United Artists pushed the movie back from May 2001 to August of 2001. During that same time, MGM appointed a new head of marketing and distribution who pressured John McTiernan into re-editing and reshooting a bunch of scenes in the film. They hoped that this would fix the problems that test audiences had with the movie, but they also wanted to make sure that this newer cut aimed for a PG-13 rating instead of R in order to appeal to a wider audience. And the ending was completely changed. And that explains a lot. Because the ending had to be reworked, the editors were forced to go back and cut a bunch of dialogue that no longer made sense to the story. So you'll see these little jump cuts throughout the film, and they're extremely jarring. But they are nothing compared to this just absolutely terrible night vision scene towards the end of the movie. The film's budget started to run dry towards the end of production, so they just slapped a horrible night vision filter onto this footage and called it a day. Even though this is undoubtedly just a terrible mess of a movie, I liked a select few of the action scenes, and above all, this thing is truly a time capsule for the early 2000s. The soundtrack for the 1975 Rollerball was filled to the brim with classical music, whereas the remake has tracks by Rob Zombie, P.O.D., and Slipknot, who also make an on-screen appearance. Pink also made a brief cameo in the movie, but weirdly enough didn't have a song on the soundtrack. The film went on to make $25.9 million against a reported production budget of $70 million. Just a few years after Rollerball ran its course, and the dust began to settle on this almost universally hated remake, an investigation involving the film's director, John McTiernan, started making headlines. In the early 2000s, Anthony Pellicano made a name for himself as a fixer for some of the biggest names in Hollywood. If you're not sure what a fixer is, here's the official definition. A person who makes arrangements for other people, especially of an illicit or devious kind. In Anthony's case, that definition was an understatement. This guy racked up literally hundreds of criminal charges. Everything from racketeering, conspiracy, witness tampering, identity theft, wire fraud, computer fraud, and lastly, something that pertains to today's video, wiretapping. In 2002, Anthony Pellicano's office was raided by the FBI because of his suspected involvement in a threat made to film producer Julius Nasso. During that raid, 2 explosive devices were found, along with transcripts of wiretaps. In other words, illegal recordings of telephone conversations. Anthony was sentenced to 30 months in federal prison for the possession of those explosive devices, and while incarcerated, a grand jury investigation surrounding the wiretaps found during the raid continued on. Anthony was set to be released from prison on February 4, 2006, but he was instead transferred to the Metropolitan Detention Center to face new charges, over 110 of them. A little over 1 week later, on February 13, 2006, a special agent from the FBI contacted Rollerball director John McTiernan to interview him about Anthony Pellicano's use of illegal wiretapping. The agent asked John if he had previously discussed wiretapping with Pellicano, and John stated that he had never discussed wiretapping, and Anthony never mentioned his ability to wiretap telephone calls. But his statement didn't hold any water, because in the FBI's possession, were recordings of a phone conversation between Anthony Pellicano and John McTiernan from August 17, 2000. On those recordings, Anthony confirmed that he installed a wiretap on the telephone of Rollerball producer Charles Roven, and John McTiernan instructed Anthony to listen for instances where the producer was saying one thing to the studio and saying something else to others, or bad-mouthing the studio guys. All of this stemmed from the fact that during the making of Rollerball, the director John McTiernan and one of the movie's producers, Charles Roven, had disagreements over what kind of movie it should be. Seeing as the film's script was rewritten multiple times before production even began, that is definitely easy to believe. Unfortunately, it's kind of difficult to figure out what their exact disagreements were because the FBI instructed the victims to share essentially absolutely nothing with the media. But a writer from Deadline theorized that during the making of Rollerball, McTiernan was most likely paranoid after one of his previous movies, Last Action Hero, tanked at the box office. The writer of this article stated that executives at Sony informed her that John McTiernan suspected several big Hollywood names of working overtime to spread early bad buzz about the movie to sink his career. Continuing with, McTiernan could have been crazed when his Rollerball remake began receiving bad early buzz many months before its scheduled release. After a lengthy trial, John McTiernan was sentenced to federal prison in April of 2013. After serving his time, John directed a bunch of live-action shorts for the video game Ghost Recon Wildlands, and is soon directing his first feature film since the release of Basic in 2003. As for Rollerball, Amazon acquired the studio that owns the rights to the franchise, MGM, in 2022. So don't be surprised if they announce a remake movie or even a Prime Video series in the coming years. But that'll do it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.